Greetings, denizens of the internet! You can call me Nitro Indigo, and today I'm going to tell you some real-life facts about every character species in Amber Isle. Well, except the player and Mirage. They don't have fixed appearances. This video is light on spoilers, and I'll go through the characters in the order they're listed in the journal. But before we begin, I need to explain some terminology. When biologists discover and document a species, they give it a two-part scientific name, or binomen. The first word is the genus, plural genera, and the second word is the specific name. If a binomen has already been mentioned in a body of text, you can abbreviate the genus the next time you mention the species, which is why Tyrannosaurus rex gets shortened to T-Rex. Usually, prehistoric animals are referred to by their genus names in popular culture, and Amber Isle is no exception. Most of the characters belong to genera with multiple species, so in this video I'll try to figure out which ones they are, just for fun. Genera that only contain one species are monotypic. Also, like all sciences, palaeontology, the study of prehistoric life, is constantly changing. People are always making new discoveries, and there are some things we'll never know for sure. If I make any mistakes in this video, or if anything I say becomes outdated, please let me know in the comments. With that all out of the way, let's begin! Ardi is the monotypic Megalosaurus bucklandi, the first non-bird dinosaur to be given a scientific name. It was a theropod, a group of dinosaurs with 2 legs, hollow bones, and less than 5 toes on each foot, and lived in England about 165 million years ago. Megalosaurus is famous for an outdated statue at the Crystal Palace in London, built between 1852 and 1854, which depicts it as a humpbacked quadruped. For a long time, Megalosaurus was used as a wastebasket taxon, which means that all sorts of large theropods were called Megalosaurus, even though they weren't that similar. Coral is the monotypic Plesiosaurus dolichodyrus, which lived in southern England from 199 to 192 million years ago. It was the first plesiosaur to be named. They were marine reptiles with short tails and 4 flippers, and their closest living relatives might be turtles. It was discovered by Mary Anning, a paleontologist who wasn't respected in her time because she was a poor woman. Plesiosaurus also has a sculpture at the Crystal Palace, which depicts it with a more flexible neck than it probably had in life. Maple is a pteranodon, which only has one undisputed species, P. longiceps. In popular culture, it's usually called a pterodactyl, not to be confused with Pterodactylus, the first pterosaur to be named. Pterosaurs were close relatives of dinosaurs that had wings made of skin supported by their long ring fingers. Unlike dinosaurs, which walk on their toes, pterosaurs walked on their palms and soles. Pteranodon lived in the central United States of America from 86 to 78 million years ago. Back then, sea levels were higher, so North America was divided into 2 landmasses by the Western Interior Seaway, La Armidia in the west and Appalachia in the east. It probably hunted like a pelican, diving into the ocean to catch fish, and females had shorter head crests than the males. The mare is an iguanodon, the second non-bird dinosaur to be named. I think he's the type species, I. bernisartensis, because of his long, straight thumb claws. It was an ornithopod, a group of dinosaurs that chewed plants with their cheek teeth and could walk on 2 or 4 legs, that lived in Western Europe from 126 to 122 million years ago. The English paleontologist Gideon Mantell famously interpreted iguanodon's thumb claw as a horn, but the fossil he based it on isn't called iguanodon anymore. Why is this? First, we need to talk about type specimens. In order to name a new species, scientists must describe its characteristics in detail. Usually, this description is based on an individual specimen, called a holotype, that similar organisms are compared to in order to determine whether they belong to the same species. Similarly, a type species is used as a point of comparison to determine if other species belong in the same genus. The first 2 iguanodon fossils, found in England in the 1820s, were originally assigned to a species called I. anglicus. The first was a few teeth, and the other, nicknamed the Maidstone specimen, was much more complete. A few decades later, paleontologists discovered fossils of another species in Belgium, which they named I. bernisartensis. Since it was more complete, it was made the type species, even though it wasn't the first discovered. Then in 1925, the Maidstone specimen was determined to be different enough from Iguanodon to be classified as a new species in its own genus, called Mantellisaurus apathioldensis. Atlas is a taurosaurus, which only has one undisputed species, T. latus. It lived in Laramidia from 68 to 66 million years ago. It was a ceratopsian, a group of plant-eating dinosaurs with frills, beaks and horns. Taurosaurus's skull was almost 3 metres long, making it the largest of any known land animal. Its frill had 2 large holes that were covered in skin in life, suggesting its main purpose was for showing off because it wasn't solid enough for defence. In 2009, a few paleontologists suggested that Taurosaurus wasn't a distinct genus, but rather an older Triceratops. This has since been disproven, but it might have inspired the developers of Amber Isle to make him siblings with one. More on her later. Barnaby is a Sinosauropteryx prima, which was monotypic when this game was released. This small theropod lived in China from 124 to 122 million years ago, and was the first non-bird dinosaur found with feathers. All of its fossils are so well preserved that you can make out the stripes on its tail. A fossil of the closely related Huandanosaurus contains preserved melanosomes, parts of animal cells that contain pigments, that reveal its feathers were ginger. Evander is the monotypic Dinochirus mirificus, a theropod that lived in Mongolia around 70 million years ago. For a long time, it was only known from a pair of arms, so its full appearance was a mystery. More fossils were finally discovered in the 2010s, over 40 years after it was named, including a skull that was sold on the black market. This revealed that it had a blunt hadrosaur-like beak, suggesting it was a herbivore that ate soft freshwater plants. Harley is the monotypic Dakotaraptor steini, a medium-sized theropod that lived in the same time and place as Taurosaurus, if it ever existed. See, the only known Dakotaraptor fossil might be a chimera, meaning it's a combination of multiple species that were mistaken for one. Since it's owned by a private collector, it's hard for scientists to study. Kipper is the monotypic Neurognathus ammoni, a pterosaur that lived in Germany from 150 to 148 million years ago. It had a short, rounded snout and big eyes, suggesting that it was nocturnal and ate insects, like many species of bats today. Pterosaur fossils are rare because their bones are fragile and don't preserve very well, but Neurognathus is known from 2 almost complete skeletons. Nellie is a Triceratops, a ceratopsian that lived in Laramidia from 68 to 66 million years ago. The differences between its 2 species are subtle, so I'm going to play it safe and assume she's a T. horridus because it's the type species. It was discovered by the American paleontologist Othniel Charles Marsh, who originally mistook its horns for a bison's. Unlike most ceratopsians, its frill was solid bone all the way through with no holes, suggesting that it protected its neck from Tyrannosaurus bites. Scout is the monotypic Pachycephalosaurus wyomingensis, which lived in Laramidia from 70 to 66 million years ago. It's the namesake of the Pachycephalosaurs, a group of dinosaurs with thick skulls that were possibly used for headbutting each other like goats, and like most of its brethren, it's only known from its skull. So, while I was editing this video, I discovered that there was a Pachycephalosaurus fossil named Sandy that's 50% complete. Oops. However, this point still stands for other pachycephalosaurs. So how do we know what its whole body looked like? Those skulls had to be attached to something, so paleontologists can estimate its full appearance by comparing it to close relatives with more complete skeletons. For example, in 2025, a nearly complete pachycephalosaur fossil was named Zavacephale rinpoche. 2 other genera, Dracorex and Stygimoloch, might either be different species of Pachycephalosaurus or younger members of P. wyomingensis. Benji is a thylacine, the only animal in this game that survived into modern times. This marsupial once lived all over Australia, but went extinct on the mainland about 3,000 years ago, around the same time dingoes arrived. Then, the island of Tasmania's population was threatened by the arrival of Europeans, who bounty hunted it because they believed it was a threat to livestock. Its rarity made it desirable to collectors, so many more were either taxidermied for museums or sent to zoos, where they failed to breed. The last known thylacine died in 1936 at the Hobart Zoo. He was allegedly called Benjamin, which might have inspired Benji's name. Chester is the monotypic Ankylosaurus magniventris, which lived in Laramidia from 68 to 66 million years ago. It's the namesake of the ankylosaurs, a group of dinosaurs with broad, armoured bodies, as well as its most famous member. However, it wasn't the first discovered. That was Hylaeosaurus, the third non-bird dinosaur to be named. Ankylosaurus and its relatives had long, winding sinuses that might have helped them cool down by dissipating heat from their skulls into the surrounding air. Echo is a Parasaurolophus, an ornithopod that lived in Laramidia from 76 to 73 million years ago. It's the most famous of the hadrosaurs, a group of ornithopods with vaguely duck-like snouts. I think she's the type species, P. walkeri, because her crest is long and sticks out over the back of her head. The crest was an extension of its nose, and was probably used to create low-pitched sounds to communicate. Fawn is a Shunnosaurus, which only has one formally described species, S. leae. So, while I was editing this video, I discovered that there are actually 2 valid species of Shunnosaurus, as well as a third not officially described species. I got them confused because they have similar names. It was a sauropod, a group of 4-legged, long-necked dinosaurs that includes the largest land animals ever, and lived in China from 161 to 157 million years ago. Unusually for a sauropod, it had a tail club like an ankylosaur, which was probably used for attacking predators. I can't find any evidence of the real Shunnosaurus having a row of spikes along its back like Fawn does, but other sauropods did, such as a Margosaurus. Flint is an Allosaurus, a theropod that lived in North America and Portugal from 155 to 143 million years ago. Based on his big, pointy eyebrows, I think he's an A. gimadseni, the same species as the famous fossil Big Al. Allosaurus bite marks have been found on all sorts of dinosaurs in the central United States, including other Allosauruses. Molly is a Meolania, a stem turtle that lived across Oceania from 16 million to 12,000 years ago. I think she's the most well-known species, M. platyceps, because of her straight horns. But what is a stem turtle, anyway? First, I need to explain what taxonomy is. Biologists categorise closely related organisms, such as animals, into groups called taxa, singular taxon. These are defined as the last common ancestor of 2 given species and all of its descendants, including extinct ones. This is called a crown group, and they're depicted on family trees called phylogenies. When dealing with fossils, it's hard to know for certain who's related to who without DNA evidence, so phylogenies are usually based on series of physical traits. The more traits 2 organisms have in common, the more closely related they probably are. A stem group consists of a crown group's closest relatives. Meolania falls just outside of the definition of a turtle, but since it's close enough, we call it a stem turtle. Poppy is a Tyrannosaurus rex, which was monotypic when this game was in development. This theropod lived in Laramidia from 69 to 66 million years ago and is the only dinosaur most people know the binomen of. But did you know it wasn't always called that? When the American paleontologist Edward Drinker Cope discovered 2 of its vertebrae in 1892, he named it Manospondylus gigas. Another paleontologist, Henry Fairfield Osborn, named a partial skeleton of the same species, Tyrannosaurus rex, in 1905. According to the rules of nomenclature, the first name given to a species has to stick, usually. By the time anyone realised they were the same species, everyone had been calling it Tyrannosaurus rex for over 100 years. At the turn of the millennium, the International Code of Zoological Nomenclature, which sets the rules for animals' scientific names, added a new rule that a newer name can stay if the original name hasn't been used in scientific papers for over 50 years. Azra is an Anomalocaris, an arthropod that lived all over the world from 520 to 499 million years ago. Arthropods are animals with exoskeletons and jointed legs, such as insects and arachnids. Based on their short eye stalks, I think Azra is the type species, A. canadensis. Anomalocaris lived during the Cambrian explosion, a period of time when multicelled organisms rapidly diversified. Well, rapid in evolutionary terms. It probably took up to 25 million years. There were animals before this, but most of them were squishy and didn't move much. Anomalocaris was one of the first apex predators, meaning it was a hunter that wasn't hunted by anything as an adult, and grasped its soft-bodied prey with its spiky forelimbs. Bosco is an Andrewsarchus, an even-toed hoofed mammal that lived in China from 48 to 38 million years ago. I think he's the type species, A. mongoliensis, because the other one is only known from a couple of teeth. Based on its wrinkled molars and relatively small canine teeth, it was probably an omnivore. The type species is only known from a single skull, so most of its appearance is inferred based on its similarities to entelodonts, a group of pig-like mammals that lived all over the northern hemisphere from 37 to 16 million years ago. Their closest living relatives are hippos and whales. Chico is a Dimorphodon macronix, a monotypic pterosaur that lived in Europe from 201 to 190 million years ago. Like Plesiosaurus, it was discovered by Mary Anning. Unlike most reptiles, its teeth came in two shapes, 4 or 5 fangs at the front, and many smaller teeth at the back. Its jaws could close quickly, but had a weak bite force, so it probably ate small vertebrates such as mammals. Its short wings and large head suggest that it could only fly in short bursts. Kai is a helicoprion, a stem shark that lived all over the world from 290 to 270 million years ago. It has 3 species that are distinguished by the shapes and positions of their teeth, but Kai's are so stylised that I can't figure out which one he is, so I'm going to assume he's the best known species, H. davisi. Helicoprion is only known from its spiral-shaped jaws, called tooth walls, which are so weird that nobody was sure how they were positioned for a long time. A lot of older artwork shows it with tooth walls on top of or under its snout, but it's now thought they were inside its mouth. Malik is a Chronosaurus queenslandicus, a monotypic plesiosaur that lived in Australia from 125 to 100 million years ago. At 10 metres long and weighing an estimated 11 metric tonnes, it was the largest pliosaur, a group of plesiosaurs with short necks, big heads, and back flippers that were larger than their front ones. That last part is important because not all short-necked plesiosaurs are pliosaurs. Marnie is an Apatosaurus, a sauropod that lived in North America from 152 to 151 million years ago. I think she's the type species A. ajax because of her flat back. But wait, there's more! You might have heard that Brontosaurus is another name for Apatosaurus. This was true for a long time, because the American paleontologist Elmer Riggs argued that Brontosaurus excelsus wasn't distinct enough to be a separate genus in 1903, so he renamed it A. excelsus. However, a 2015 study determined that A. excelsus and 2 other species were distinct enough to belong to a different genus, so Brontosaurus was brought back. Vinny is a Dunkleosteus, a placoderm that lived all over the northern hemisphere from 382 to 358 million years ago. Placoderms were fish with armoured heads and beak-like jaws. The rest of their skeletons were made of cartilage, much like a shark's, so they rarely fossilise. There are several species of Dunkleosteus, which are mostly known from their skulls. I think she's the type species, D. terrelli, because of her broad, rounded head. For a long time, D. terrelli was estimated to be up to 10 metres long. Then in 2023, Russell K. Engelman, an American paleontologist, published a study that re-estimated its size based on the distance between its eyes and gills, which strongly correlates with total length in modern fish. He shrunk the dunk to a range of 3 to 4 metres long. Axel is a Sarcosuchus, a stem crocodilian that lived in Africa and South America from 130 to 112 million years ago. I think he's the type species, S. imperator, because the other one is only known from fragmentary remains. Like modern crocodilians, Sarcosuchus was an ambush predator that lived in rivers, but Pseudosuchians, the larger group that crocodilians belong to, used to be a lot more diverse. They included a secret extra group of marine reptiles, Jurassic Park raptors in real life, and my favourite, I can't believe it's not Coelophysis. Basil is a Styracosaurus, a ceratopsian that lived in North America from 75 to 74 million years ago. I think he's the type species, S. albertensis, because his largest spikes are parallel to each other. Every Styracosaurus fossil has a different number, length and arrangement of spikes on its frill, including one that's asymmetrical. Like Torosaurus, their frills were probably for display over defence. Elliot is a Dimetrodon, a synapsid that lived in North America and Europe from 295 to 270 million years ago. What's a synapsid? You're a synapsid. I'm a synapsid. It's the wider group that mammals belong to, defined by having one hole behind each eye socket, whereas reptiles usually have two. There are a lot of Dimetrodon species, and I think he's the type D. limbatus, because of his size and the shape of his head. Dimetrodon's most distinctive feature is the sail along its back, but nobody's sure what it was used for. Was it for regulating their body temperature? Showing off? Something else? We don't know yet. Speaking of sails, Ezra is the monotypic Spinosaurus aegypticus, a theropod that lived in North Africa from 100 to 94 million years ago. Growing up to 14 metres long and weighing an estimated 7.4 metric tonnes, it was one of the largest theropods and also one of the strangest. Its long snout and paddle-like tail suggested it lived in rivers and ate fish, like a dinosaurian crocodile. The Spinosaurus holotype was discovered in 1912, but it was sadly destroyed when the Bavarian State Collection of Palaeontology was bombed during World War II. Fortunately, another nearly complete fossil was discovered in Morocco in 2013, and the next year it was declared the replacement holotype, or neotype. In the early 2020s, there were a lot of debates about Spinosaurus. It seemed like there was a paper every few months that said everything we knew about it was wrong. Could it swim? Did it walk on all fours? Could it walk at all? Fortunately, the consensus had settled by the time Amber Isle was released. Newt is the monotypic Dilophosaurus weatherilli, a theropod that lived in North America from 195 to 184 million years ago. It's most famous for its appearance in Jurassic Park, which is very inaccurate. The real Dilophosaurus was much bigger, at over 7 metres long, though the one in the movie is implied to be a baby. There's also no evidence that it had a frill or could spit toxins. Those were made up for dramatic effect. Opal is a Diplocaulus, a lepospondyle that lived in North America and Africa from 307 to 257 million years ago. Lepospondyls were amphibian-like animals with cylindrical vertebrae. I think she's the most well-known species, D. magnicornis, because of her wide head and rounded horns. This one is known from hundreds of fossils that died at a wide range of ages, meaning we have a pretty good idea of how it grew up. Diplocaulus's smooth, boomerang-shaped skull may have acted as a hydrofoil, making it easier for them to swim upwards by reducing drag from the water. Russell is the monotypic Longisquama insignis, a reptile that lived in Kyrgyzstan 235 million years ago. Its most distinctive feature is the row of long, feather-like scales along its back. It's only known from one poorly preserved fossil, so its relationship to other reptiles was a mystery for a long time. However, a few months after Amber Isle was released, a similar reptile known from better fossils was named Myrasora grauvogelli. It also has long scales on its back, so it was determined to be a close relative of Longisquama. Now they're both classified as drepanosaurs, an extinct group of reptiles that looked like chameleons with bird heads. Cecil is the monotypic Brachiosaurus altithorax, a sauropod that lived in North America from 156 to 145 million years ago. Unlike most dinosaurs, its forelegs were longer than its back legs. It's often depicted with a tall crest on its head in popular culture. This is based on Giraffatitan brancae, which used to be considered a species of Brachiosaurus, because nobody has found B. altithorax's skull yet. Chip is the monotypic Carnotaurus sastrae, a theropod that lived in Argentina from 69 to 66 million years ago. Its arms are proportionately tiny, even smaller than Tyrannosaurus's, but unusually for a theropod, it has 4 fingers on each hand. Only one fossil has been found so far, but it's almost complete, missing only the legs and tail. The rest of its appearance is inferred based on other abelisaurs, a group of tiny-armed theropods that lived throughout South America. Clover is the monotypic Maiasaura peebles aurum, a hadrosaur that lived in North America from 86 to 71 million years ago. The first fossil to be discovered was found near a nest, providing evidence that non-bird dinosaurs looked after their offspring, instead of leaving them to fend for themselves like other reptiles. Maiasaura hatchlings had legs that were too underdeveloped to walk with, yet their fossilised teeth show signs of wear, meaning that their parents must have brought them food. Hazel is a Smilodon, a saber-toothed cat that lived in the Americas from 2.5 million to 8,000 years ago. I think she's the most well-known species, S. fatalis, because of her short muzzle. She lives in the game's desert area, which may seem strange because Smilodon is an icon of the Ice Age, or to use its proper name, the last glacial period. However, an ice age is any period of time when the Earth has ice caps at the poles all year, meaning we're in one right now. During the last glacial period, there was less liquid water to go around, so the climate was drier than it is today. Smilodon lived in forests and grasslands, especially near the tropics. Joffrey is a velociraptor, which only has one undisputed species, V. mongoliensis. This small feathered theropod lived in Eastern Asia from 75 to 71 million years ago. Like Dilophosaurus, it was made famous by Jurassic Park, which portrayed Velociraptor even more inaccurately. See, in 1988, the American theropod researcher Gregory S. Paul suggested that a larger dinosaur, Deinonychus antieuropus, was a species of Velociraptor. This didn't catch on in the scientific community, but when Michael Crichton wrote Jurassic Park, he called the Deinonychus Velociraptor because it sounded cooler. Also, non-bird dinosaurs having feathers wasn't common knowledge in the 90s. Pepper is a Stegosaurus, which lived in North America and Portugal from 155 to 145 million years ago. Based on her blunt pentagonal plates, I think she's the type species S. stenops. It's the namesake of the stegosaurs, a group of dinosaurs with 4 legs, tiny heads, rows of plates along their backs, and spiky tails. Stegosaurus is unusual among stegosaurs, however, for not having spikes on its shoulders as well. Rowan is a Quetzalcoatlus, which only has one undisputed species, Q. northropi. This pterosaur lived in North America from 68 to 66 million years ago. With an 11-metre wingspan, it was one of the largest flying animals ever, though the closely related Hartzegopteryx was probably heavier. Both of them were asdarchids, a group of pterosaurs with long legs and long necks. Their proportions are more similar to giraffes than any flying animals alive today, so their lifestyles have been the subject of many debates. The current consensus is that they spent most of their time on the ground and only flew occasionally, launching from all fours with their powerful leg and wing muscles. Willow is a Psittacosaurus, a ceratopsian that lived in Asia from 125 to 105 million years ago. It's known from hundreds of fossils, including 30 babies and their babysitter, and one fighting a mammal. There are a lot of species of Psittacosaurus, and I think she's P. sinensis because she has horns on her cheeks. Her colours and quills match SMF R4970, an exceptionally well-preserved specimen from China. Unlike later ceratopsians, Psittacosaurus didn't have a frill and was bipedal as an adult, but it still had a beak and pointy cheekbones. Donnie is a Coelodonta, which lived in Eurasia around 14,000 years ago. Since he's woolly, I think it's safe to say he's the type species, C. antiquitatis, also known as the woolly rhinoceros. Their bodies have been found frozen in ice with their fur intact, which was brown, much like Donnie's. Since they lived so recently in evolutionary terms, their remains contain enough intact DNA for researchers to sequence their genomes. Their closest living relative is the Sumatran rhinoceros. Gale is the monotypic Therizinosaurus cheloniformis, a theropod that lived in Mongolia 70 million years ago. Unlike most theropods, it had a small head, big arms, and 8 leaves. Therizinosaurus's most distinctive feature is its huge claws, which were up to 50 centimetres long. They were mainly used to grasp tree branches, and possibly to intimidate predators too. Gwen is a direwolf, a canine that lived in the Americas from 125,000 to 10,000 years ago. Its binomen was originally Canis dirus because it was thought to be the ancestor of the grey wolf, C. lupus. However, when researchers extracted DNA from direwolf fossils in 2021, they discovered that the two species weren't closely related. The direwolf was moved to a new genus and is now known as Anocyon dirus. So, while editing, I discovered it's a bit more complicated than that, and the direwolf has changed genera multiple times. Orla is a glyptodon, an armadillo that lived in South America from 3 million to 11,000 years ago. Based on her size, I think she's the largest undisputed species, G. munizzi. It lived in the same grasslands as Smilodon, so I have no idea what she's doing in the tundra. This was during the Great American Interchange, when the Isthmus of Panama rose from the seafloor and connected the Americas, allowing land animals to travel between them. Armadillos originated in the south, but faced new competition when cats and other predators arrived from the north. Pen is an Archaeopteryx, a theropod that lived in Germany from 151 to 140 million years ago. It has two species that are mainly distinguished by their toe claws, but the only sources I can find to explain the difference in detail are either behind a paywall or in a language I barely understand, so I'm going to play it safe and assume he's the type species A. lithographica. Archaeopteryx is one of the most famous examples of a transitional fossil. It has traits of earlier dinosaurs, such as teeth and a long tail, and modern birds, such as feathery wings. This doesn't mean Archaeopteryx was the first bird, but it was probably similar to the first bird. In the first edition of On the Origin of Species, published in 1859, Charles Darwin wrote that the lack of transitional fossils could be the biggest evidence against his theory of descent with modification, but explained that this was because fossils were rare. 2 years later, the discovery of Archaeopteryx filled the gap and gave his theory more credibility. Raven is a microraptor, a theropod that lived in China 120 million years ago. I think she's the type species, M. zhouianus, because her fingers are all roughly the same length. At less than a metre long and weighing an estimated 1.4 kilograms, it's one of the smallest non-bird dinosaurs. Despite having 4 feathered wings, it probably couldn't fly, only glide. Much like the BMNHC PH881 specimen, Raven has glossy black feathers. Microraptor was discovered under unusual circumstances. A Chinese farmer stuck fossils of its tail, the bird Yanornis, and an unnamed third species together and sold them to a dealer who smuggled it to the United States. In 1999, National Geographic published an article claiming that paleontologists had discovered a new dinosaur named Archaeoraptor, which was a lie. Meanwhile, the Chinese paleontologist Xu Xing found the rest of the fossil that Archaeoraptor's tail came from and named it Microraptor in 2000. Rusty is a woolly mammoth which lived across the northern hemisphere from 400,000 to 4,000 years ago, meaning it died out around the same time the Egyptians built the Great Pyramids. Its remains are found all over Siberia, so the locals have known about it for a long time, but the first person to recognise it as an extinct elephant was the French naturalist Georges Cuvier in 1796. Based on genetic evidence, its closest living relative is the Asian elephant. Finally, Vern is the monotypic Eutyrannus huali, a theropod that lived in China 125 million years ago. It's the largest dinosaur known to have feathers, reaching up to 9 metres long and weighing an estimated 1.1 metric tons. As its name suggests, it's a distant relative of Tyrannosaurus. Specifically, they're both tyrannosauroids, a group of theropods with blunt snouts, fused nose bones and long legs. Overall, I think Amber Isle has a decent range of species. About half the characters are big celebrity dinosaurs, but it also has some obscure pics I've never seen as anthropomorphic characters before, such as Mayolania and Longisquama. Special thanks to Nazragar for proofreading and fact-checking the script, and until next time, stay interesting!